Hunter x Hunter stans never acknowledge the flaws of the series. Fair enough. Let's change that. Hello and welcome to the NewWorldReview, your source for everything anime and manga. My name is Liam, and what I mean to say is that I am your source for everything, primarily Hunter x Hunter. Because I like this series. I really like it. I think it's a monumental human achievement, and there is just no other story like it. And there probably never will be, but with that said, it is still far from perfect. Like very, very far from perfect. And as a result, a lot of controversial Hunter x Hunter opinions exist, even from the hardest and coriest of fans. So I decided to ask for your controversial Hunter x Hunter opinions, such as the following. The Bungee Gum joke is overused, which I don't even need to reply to because username that I honestly can't pronounce has me covered. The Bungee Gum joke has the properties of both jokes and overuse. And while I may agree, I have to admit that there is something sort of comforting about always seeing a Bungee Gum joke wherever I go. I love the idea that Hunter x Hunter is just such an enduring experience that probably even centuries from now, weird high-tech cyborg space humans will be making Bungee Gum comments to one another on their way deep into Uranus. Speaking of dank crap holes, the sponsor of today's video is not that. But today's video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends, the game that exists and is by far the biggest hit on the mobile platform. But one of their biggest highlights is bosses. In fact, Raid has an insane amount of badass looking bosses, such as the new Sylvania, Guardian of the Spirit Keep. Although it's kind of sad because Sylvania has something that we would recognize as a Karapika type backstory, whereby she went out one day and came back to find that her family had just disappeared. Tragic. And there is a ton happening in Raid this month. In fact, there's a special event each and every day, as well as a brand new Guardian ring that allows you to use your champions in all sorts of new and Garderific ways. And at the start of December, Raid is releasing one of its biggest, most anticipated features ever. Take a look at this. So if you want to get a head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description or scan my QR code, and you'll get an epic hero, Chinoru, who is amazing in the Doom Tower, 200k silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard, so that you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in game. All rewards will be waiting for you here. These rewards will be available in game for the next 30 days and only for new players, so you know what? Go and do the thing, and good luck, Shadow Raiders. But now, back to some controversial Hunter x Hunter opinions. Gon should never come back. And this is a much more detailed statement than that, but look, I get ya. To some degree, I'm still kind of iffy about the fact that Gon even survived the Chimera Ant arc. However, the conclusion I tend to land on is that his survival gives a lot of closure to Killua, and as the best boy, I can't really complain about that. In terms of Gon coming back though, I am predictably on DeFor's side here. I think that Hunter x Hunter has evolved into a story that is really difficult to tell with a character like Gon at the helm, who was very much the last remnant of Togashi's early shonen days that has now spiraled into a dark political seinen, and I think that's a big part of why Gon had to become such a radically different character during the Chimera Ant arc, because his original persona just doesn't quite fit in with what Hunter x Hunter became. So I think just keep him on Whale Island and let's finish this up with Karapika, if we ever finish this up, that is. I want to see Karapika become a villain. He would be absolutely terrifying. His lust for revenge is already scary. Just imagine if he was a villain on top of it. And I want to say that we did kind of see that during York New because, you know, one villain killing another villain does not make the original villain a not villain, also known as a hero, I suppose. And that's definitely one of the very possible paths for Karapika to end up going down. At the moment, he seems to have kind of cast his humanity to the side for the sake of recovering the Scarlet Eyes, but he's going to be torn during the Succession War because right now, instead of fighting for the helpless dead, he's now fighting for the helpless living in the form of Prince Wobble. So there are decisions to be made. I actually felt pity for Neferpito when they died. This is an interesting one. I tend to meet two different types of Hunter x Hunter fans. Those that appreciate Pito and those that absolutely hate Pito, mostly for the whole kite murder situation. But personally, I did genuinely feel pity for Pito during the whole Gon fight, if you can even call it a fight. To me, it was definitely more of a vicious murder. It's weird though, because on the one hand, it is very twistedly satisfying to see this creature finally facing some sort of consequences for the sheer nightmare they've caused. But on the other hand, Pito grew a lot since the kite killing. Pito matured almost in tandem with Meruem, so it is quite sad to see all of the newfound potential in Pito snuffed out by a child having a tantrum. But at the same time, that is the fate that Pito brought upon themselves as well. It's bittersweet, but if like there was no sweet, it's bitter and slightly less bitter. This show has flaws, but there's nothing actually terrible about it. I'm just trying to think if there's anything thing that I really don't like about Hunter x Hunter. There's an awful lot that I used to dislike but have since come around to appreciating. Like the idea that Togashi very rarely has a satisfying end for arcs. They mostly just get to a point where they stop suddenly and we immediately switch focus to the new thing. I used to hate that because I like my stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And Hunter x Hunter was more like a beginning, a middle, and then all of a sudden another beginning. But in retrospect, that's one of the things I really respect about Togashi. When he got tired of writing something, he simply just flipped a switch and turned it into something that did interest him. And if he didn't, then we'd probably receive a really flat and not at all unique series as a result. I like the wordiness of the succession arc in the manga. I didn't find it to be a big hindrance and it actually interested me. This may very well be the first truly unpopular opinion. I definitely found it to be a bit of a hindrance when I was going through it for the first time, but there's quite a few reasons for that. To start, I came off the heels of the 2011 anime, so switching to the manga was always going to be a bit of a medium shock, and it happened to be during an arc with this critical mass of words, so there is that. And there's also the fact that I started out by reading the scans, which are formatted absolutely abysmally when it comes to dialogue. The official translation is, well, look at it, it's still undeniably wordy, but the chunks of text are structured in such a way that it makes it look infinitely more manageable, and not just like you're repeatedly smashing your head against a brick wall of text during every page. But words are great, so great in fact that I would be happy if Togashi got rid of all of the images and just made a word-only manga, which I think is called a book. I definitely wouldn't be complaining if the Succession War arc was finished in a novel. It would give Togashi the space to write about all of the complex drama and end technicalities, just write as much as you like, without needing to worry about all of the drawing and stuff that seems to hold him back currently. Meanwhile, we also have the inverse opinion. The Succession War arc is filled with just novels of boring exposition and poor art, with none of the new characters being interesting aside from the fourth prince. And it's hard to disagree because honestly, the Succession War it's pretty much only as interesting as you choose to make it. There's a ton of princes who I in no way cared about until I started making YouTube videos about them, and all of a sudden I started to really take to them. They each have their own fascinating nuances, family dynamics, and profound human ideas to explore. With the Karkin Empire in particular, each prince tends to represent a different aspect of society. Like how Prince Benjamin represents the military, Sradnik the arts, Tebepper is all about science, Tyson explores religion, and so on and so forth. They all have a really nice degree of substance to them, but admittedly you do have to dig pretty deep to reach that substance. The only princes I have no feelings regarding whatsoever are Momozere and Mariam. Those two do feel a bit tacked on to add numbers, but look, the rest are fine. Genthru wasn't a bad villain. His power was cool and interesting restrictions, and he was pretty menacing. Also, his final fight with Gon was awesome. So I actually wanted to make a video about this, but I'm kind of afraid that nobody will watch a video focused on Genthru. I've sort of come around to him as well. I still think that he's probably the weakest Hunter x Hunter villain, but to be fair, the standards in the series are pretty high. He did have interesting abilities for sure, although I feel like I would have appreciated him more if he was just a weak, not at all competent combat dude guy who made his way through this world with just the insane ability of planting bombs. I think that might have been a much more interesting exploration than just turning him into a big bad shonen main villain guy. I guess the most annoying thing about Genthru is that we never got to learn what makes him tick, because his abilities are terrifying. They remind me of the powers of the Meteor City Elder actually, who was able to create suicide bombers. But that was the result of a very powerful need under great restrictions. So I want to know how Genthru landed on this solution for his abilities. And maybe the answer is just, he's insane and he likes to do the killing. But if that is the case, then he's just not worth thinking about because, well, there's nothing to think about. Heaven's Arena was a bad intro for Nen. Maybe, but what else could you do? Hunter x Hunter was put in a very strange spot early on, because generally the power system of a battle shonen is revealed in the very first chapter. For example, One Piece showcases devil fruits, Naruto shows off some chakra, and Black Clover makes some vaguely defined magic very, very obvious. But Nen was a bit more of an afterthought. And this is fairly consistent with Togashi. I mean, thinking about his previous series, Yu Yu Hakusho, the spirit energy power system isn't mentioned at all for like the first 20 chapters, and then it goes on to become pretty much the most important core aspect of the series. So with Nen, there was never going to be a good introduction though. With how Togashi writes, and particularly with the nature of Hunter x Hunter, it was always going to be a bit tricky. However, I will admit that it probably would have helped if Wing had not deliberately misexplained it the first time we heard about it. The Phantom Troupe is a cool group, but it has some very forgettable members and is very unbalanced in terms of power. Yeah, so I did notice this when I did a poll asking all of you to rank our various Phantom Troupians. I got a lot of comments saying something along the lines of, I don't remember half of them, and that's fair enough, because quite a few of them have had limited or even no chance to really make an impression. Because when people say that, hey, they like the Phantom Troupe, chances are they mean they like Crollo and Phaeton. If someone says Finks, then you know that, hey, they've delved a bit deeper. And if someone says Benolanov, then you found a true fan of culture. Netero really wasn't the strongest hunter alive when he fought Meruem. Whoa. Big words there. Very specific words as well. If you'd stated that Netero wasn't the strongest human alive, that might be one thing, as I do think that Beyond Netero implies exactly what his name is. However, he is not a hunter. So if we're going with just hunters, then that's something we can actually quantify, because we know who the strongest hunters are, and that would be the Zodiacs, many of whom are completely out of contention compared to Netero. You could make an argument for maybe Jing being a better Nen user and therefore also potentially stronger at the time, very maybe. But the others, including Pariston, I just don't see it. I mean, imagine a scenario where instead of Netero being sent to fight Meruem, the association sends, say, Cluck, and look, it just probably wouldn't result in the same epic battle we all know and love. So I think that Netero may still have been the strongest hunter, but not the strongest human. Election Arc is number 1. It introduces the best character in the series, Pariston, whilst also giving the Zoldycks incredible added depth. Also, Nanika is perfect. I suppose I did ask for controversial opinions, but even so, I wasn't quite expecting that. Of every arc in the series, the election seems to be a very consistent downer for most people, possibly because of Sandwich Syndrome. I mean, how is it supposed to compare with the huge story that came before it with the Chimera Ants, and how is the election supposed to compare with the endless promise of the Dark Continent immediately after it? It doesn't really, it occupies a very unfortunate space. There's definitely a lot to love about the election arc, but where it starts to lose me is everything involving Teradane. This is an example of a character and in fact a whole faction that simply just does not need to exist. It's like Togashi created him thinking that he was going to be important, then realized that he had nothing to do, and so he had Hisoka kill him. As much as I enjoy Crollo and his freaky spider friends, the troupe has long overstayed their welcome in the series. Every appearance since Greed Island has felt ham-fisted to pad out the series, with Chimera Ant arc being the worst offender. This is fascinating because I definitely think it would usually be the opposite. I myself think that the troupe have been criminally underutilized, and I'm desperate for them to be in any way relevant again, which is another reason why the Succession War stuff is so compelling, because they are finally taking the stage again for the first proper time since York New City. But if anyone else out there agrees that the Phantom Troupe outstayed their welcome, please do let me know in the comments, because it is a really fascinating opinion. Almost as fascinating as this next video, because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.